You're on.
I'm on.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our March general meeting. I'm delighted to see members here in the room and to have people out there online participating in cyberspace. We've all gotten used to meetings online, but we're trying to offer it as both online and to be here in person. And we continue to offer the online version because many people find it more convenient and it saves gas. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and it'll be later be accessible on the website too. I'm Ed Maurer, chair of the management committee of Sierra Sage, and I succeed Mike Sappingfield, who led the group with great success for many years. We're grateful for all he has done for us and are glad that he continues as a voting member of the committee. We need his expertise and his experience as we carry on. Thank you very much, Mike. Patty Sappingfield has been managing hospitality for our meetings, and she has also been mailing out our bi-monthly newsletters. Patty has decided to retire and she has resigned from our committee, and we're very sad about it. We're deeply in debt for her setting up all manner of events, from chili cookouts to reserving meeting rooms. Later this year, we will find an opportunity to express our thanks and gratitude to both of them, for both Patty and Mike. New leadership brings about change, and while we continue with the club's motto, to enjoy and explore and protect our wild areas, I will try to put on a lot of emphasis on the protect, because unless we all protect what we have, there won't be much left to enjoy and explore. We'll look at all our activities with global warming mitigation in mind. And tonight we turn our attention to what is happening in the ocean and what flows into the ocean. I thank you all for coming. And this is going to be an interesting program. I'll pass the mic on in a moment to Leslie Fitch, our programs and events co-chair, while Todd Fitch is pulling all the technological strings behind the scenes. Thank you both very much for what you're doing. Leslie?
Thank you. My name is Leslie Fitch, and I'm the program and events co-chair for Sierra Sage in South Orange County. I'm pleased to introduce this evening's speaker, Forrest Lay, who comes to us from the Water and Ocean Conservation Group, Heal the Bay. The title of their talk is Know the Flow. Forrest is a passionate community service volunteer and manager with Heal the Bay, as well as a Salesforce wizard. They are thrilled to present to us on their area of expertise about water and where it comes from in Southern California. Forrest joined Heal the Bay after completing their master's degree in biology at the California Institute of Technology in 2019. They are known for their volunteer engagement, analytics strategy, and eagerness to assist volunteers and other staff. Forrest also enjoys rock climbing, salsa dancing, and exploring the wilderness with their adventurous rabbit, Han Solo. Please join me in welcoming Forrest to Sierra Sage.
Oh, thank you both for those wonderful introductions. That was the first time I had heard the Sierra Club's motto, and it got me really excited about the outdoors. Oh, would you mind allowing my screen sharing? As an opening, I wanted to let you all know that I really enjoy conversational style presentations where we have a dialogue. So if anyone has questions during the meeting, I do not mind at all being interrupted, because I would really be most happy if y'all are learning about the things that y'all want to learn about and are interested in. The title of this talk is called Know the Flow, and it's all about the challenges that Los Angeles faces with getting water here and this Mediterranean climate that faces challenges from climate change and drought. For better accessibility, I'm going to turn on these captions that you'll be able to see at the top of the screen. So you've already heard a wonderful introduction on me. I've been at Hilda Bay for 2.5 years. I really love it here and love being activated to explore, the wilderness with people who are amazing and thoughtful. Probably very similar reasons why y'all have been participating in Sierra Club. So to get started on water, we all know that water is important for life, supports life on Earth. But did you know that access to safe, clean, and affordable water is a human right in the state of California? So Governor Brown signed the bill AB 685 into law in 2012, making California the first state in the nation to legislatively recognize the human right to water. Water also plays a big role in California's economy. So as a state, we produce 1/3 of the country's vegetables and 2/3 of the country's fruit. Additionally, California is the 4th largest cattle producing state in the nation. On top of all those important facilitators of life that water provides for us, it's also essential for a lot of our fun, especially a lot of us here in Los Angeles, where it gets very, very warm. So fortunately, we live on a planet that has lots of this important substance, water. 3/4 of the Earth is covered by ocean. The problem is that only a small percentage of this water is accessible to us as fresh water. And so 97% of that water is in the ocean as salt water. And then the next 3% is actually captured in ice and glaciers. And so even if we could access that water, I'm sure all of us know by now that that's something that we don't want to do, right? And then that leaves just, I think I might need to click again to show it. Oh yeah, less than 1% of the water is fresh water that we can easily consume and use for things like brushing our teeth and watering our yards. And so even though this percentage is very small, it's actually very widespread on this earth. And that is because water, when on our planet, is continually in motion through something called watersheds. So even though water touches all these places, it may not be in all of them at once, but it sure is beautiful and majestic when looked at, the changes it can make from afar in a photograph like this. So we're gonna go all the way back very quickly to a concept I'm sure y'all all used to be very familiar with, which is the water cycle. And it's all about how water on our planet is this self-cleaning substance. So in the water cycle, and I'll be brief on this review. In the water cycle, the sun heats up a large water body, and that water then evaporates and goes into the air, condenses into clouds, and then eventually will precipitate down onto the ground. And as soon as it touches the ground, it has 2 places where it could go. First of all, if it's on a substance that is spongy or soft, natural, it's most likely to go deep into the ground and seep down in there. And so most of the water is gonna infiltrate the ground and then go deep down into our groundwater stores and then eventually travel through underwater rivers back out into our main body of water, the lowest point in that watershed. And once that as the ground is becoming saturated with water, some of that water will end up staying on top. And we've seen this in the form of puddles to play in, ponds, lakes, rivers, and that water actually collects and slowly makes its way down the watershed back to the original source. So the definition of a watershed is an area of land where all the water is returning to a single point. But now that we've reviewed this water cycle, it is important to note that this is not the water cycle that we are regularly seeing whenever we walk out our doors in California or in other urban environments. So could anyone guess of what is the main difference between this photo and what we see in Los Angeles?
Well, we have so much concrete and hard surface, water can't be absorbed that easily, so maybe it runs off more.
Oh, that's exactly it. Yes, verbatim. Thank you so much. All this pavement, the roads, the parking lots, and the buildings, all of that prevents the water from going deep into the ground, into groundwater, like it would normally do. And so it stays on the top and creates more runoff. And you can see that with all these blue arrows on the surface, and then much fewer arrows going down into the ground with the infiltration. And now all this water is staying on the surface of the land rather than going underneath. This causes problems. And we have a whole other talk about how it travels on the land and collects pollution and then carries that pollution out into the ocean. There's a lot of interesting nuances there. And if you'd like to invite us back to learn more about that topic, of course we could do that. But this conversation is more about water supply. So Los Angeles needs a lot of water, and where does that water come from? So we do have some sources of growing local water. We have a whole lot of groundwater storage. We are very lucky like that in Los Angeles compared to some other places around us. We have a lot of aquifers underneath our county. And also we are beginning to do more and more water recycling in our county. And so these numbers, sometimes they get a little bit out of date because they are changing. Likely recycled water has gone up. But this shows that very little of our water currently is coming from local sources. So if it's not coming from local sources, where is it coming from? Well, very far away. We're importing that water. 86% of it, in fact, was imported for quite some time. So sent hundreds of miles. And in this next subsection, we're going to talk about like where that water is coming from, the journey it takes. But does anyone have any questions so far? And if you do about water recycling, there's more to say on that later. I think it's a very exciting topic. Okay, so the first point of origin where we're getting a lot of our water is coming from Northern California along something called the State Water Project. So here's a picture of it from above. It is an aqueduct that is a concrete lined channel that is exposed to the upper air. And we get almost half of our water from all the way up here, and it comes from snowpack near Mount Shasta, Mount Lawson. All of that water goes down into the San Francisco Bay, and we pump it right out of there. Ooh. Now, the Bay Delta is actually the largest estuary place where an estuary is a place where the river and freshwater reaches the ocean. It's one of the largest estuaries on the West Coast. To get water from there to Southern California, giant pumps actually have to draw water out of this low point with such force that occasionally it can reverse the flow of these rivers up here as well. And so lowering this water level has had consequences as well. This water that we are taking from this area has killed fish like the endangered Delta smelt And there's also concern with taking water from here for something called saltwater intrusion, where the ocean water can actually travel into the groundwater underneath this agricultural area and even prevent it from being a viable source of agriculture in the future. So in addition to those pumps for pulling water out of the Bay Delta, we also need to carry this water over a 2,000-foot high mountain range, the Tecapachi mountain range. So this aqueduct, the State Water Project, carries water nearly 400 miles, nearly 5 hours away driving without traffic, and then across a whole mountain range. And this is one of the largest energy consumers in our state, this pump to take over these mountains. So continuing to talk about the Bay Delta, Lake Oroville is near the Bay Delta. It's a water reservoir that feeds into that delta and through the San Joaquin rivers. And then if we look at this photo from 2011 and see how full this lake is, and also take a look at this thick string. The thickness symbolizes the large amount of water that we're carrying from here. And it is, which is about 50% of the water that we use here in LA. And it's also a very, very long string. And that symbolizes the very long distance that we're taking it. And we're gonna pretend, and I always think this is funny, it's especially fun with kids, we're gonna pretend that this gigantic string is a straw that we're sucking on. And Los Angeles is very, very thirsty. And we're gonna count to 3, and 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness. Now, it's very silly. And I definitely make sure to always say, like, Los Angeles is not the cause of droughts, but we're certainly a participant in it who has responsibility for treating our water well and making sure that it is available for everyone in our state, despite what the weather provides, right? So also interesting, some of you may not be fully familiar with the weather cycle in California, but we have something called a boom and bust cycle. So in between our very serious droughts, we also have really intense rainfall. And so this is that same lake at the spillover. It broke just a few years later, like these photos, they're 2011, 2014, and now it's so full that it actually broke the spillover, had to evacuate a town underneath. And so something to take away from this is that on average in LA, we get about 14 inches of rain, but there has never been a year where we're actually getting that average. There's always it's always somewhere between 9 and 20 something. It's at the extremes because we have this boom and bust cycle for our rain. Okay. The next source of water that we carry down to Los Angeles is coming from the Owens Lake bed in Eastern California. This is actually called the LA Aqueduct, and it is taking water 223 miles, which is about 4 hours away by driving, but it is about half the distance as the other aqueduct. Mm-hmm. And now what we see here is a very old picture. It's a very old picture of what used to be Owens Lake. This photo was taken in 1911. And in fact, this used to be one of the biggest lakes in the Western US. During the gold rush times, there were entire large barges that would carry gold, like the types of barges we see on the ocean, like carrying gold across this body of water that was so vast. And so now we're going to do our little game again. So we have another string. It's slightly smaller because we're not taking nearly as much water from this source, and it's a little bit shorter. It's about half the length, and we're going to take our straws and take a big old refreshing drink of water from nature. Oh my goodness. All the chaos this causes. And I think it's important to note that when this happened, when we drained Owens Lake, which is now permanently not a lake, but not as dry as it's seen in this picture, Los Angeles had been growing significantly. And there are a lot of environmental justice issues connected with this event of taking this water from this lake, one of which being that this dust that came up from the dried lake bed that so easily blew into the air with the mountain winds was full of really dangerous chemicals, including cyanide and arsenic, that affected the locals in that area. And LA has been working to mitigate the problems caused by this, spending a lot of money to rehabilitate this land. We are now no longer allowed to fully take all the water. We have to leave some of it behind to prevent the dust from going up into the air, but we still get a lot of water from this region. The third and final region that we're pulling water from is something called the Colorado River. So this is from a dam near Lake Havasu, and it is carrying the water. I want to make sure I get these numbers right. It is carrying the water 242 miles, about a 5-hour drive away from LA without traffic. And we're getting 9% of our water from this river, but we are not the only ones taking from this source of water. The Colorado River, famously the source or the generating origin of the Grand Canyon, travels through 7 different states, and a lot of different states depend on this water and are working to split it in the most equitable way possible. And so we're gonna play our game here. Oh, wait, never mind. Oh, yes. Okay. So already this river is looking a little bit dry because we're not the first state to be taking water from this river. So we've got our straw. It's 242 miles long. We'll take a big old drink. Whew. And in fact, this brings us to another factor that can be challenging, and that is that this river has been over allocated, meaning that there are more rights to water than there's actual water flowing in this river. And because of this, for 16 years, this river did not reach the Sea of Cortez in Mexico. So a recent compact between these two countries now ensures a minimum baseline flow to that estuary and ecosystem, but we entirely prevented another country from accessing this water. We're part of that. So there is this question that we can be asking ourselves, and that is it fair to be taking so much water from people who live in these far away places? And hopefully we'll have better answers to that as we move on. But first, we will talk a little bit about climate change. So you may have noticed astutely whenever I first started talking about the sources of these water is that they all have something in common. They are coming from snow melt from different mountain ranges in California. But climate change is having an effect on our snow melt, in fact. Where there was once snow, there is now a lot more rain. And this is an issue because our current water system that was built 100 years ago with these aqueducts, basically everything that we depend on to get water into our taps was built based on snow being present to store our water for free for much of the year. So whenever the snow was the storage source, it melted slowly. And traditionally that water would gradually release across the summer to meet our summer needs. But if it just falls all at once like rain, it's just going to head straight down to the ocean, and then there won't be any storage left throughout the summer for Californians to take that water, to continue taking that water. So it just speeds up that path of the water going back to the ocean instead of happening very slowly. And we continue to hear about record-breaking temperatures in the news, and in fact have experienced 18 of the hottest years on record in the past 20 years. So it continues to get hotter. And another thing to consider with our current water system that's very old is that it was built, these aqueducts, they all cross the San Andreas Fault. And so if there is an earthquake, LA is also in danger of not having access to water in that occasion, which is something to be mindful of. So after we've sent water from these very far away places, hundreds of miles, this water is used in our daily needs, flushing our toilets, taking showers, washing our clothes. And then we send that water after it goes down the drain, down to one of our water treatment plants where we clean up that water. And then we send that water right into the ocean. Nearly 270 million gallons from Hyperion alone every single day. And with it, and additionally, water on the surface is carrying pollution into our ocean as well as it collects things in our streets. And so we're losing 250 million million gallons of water from our pipes into the ocean. And then from our storm drains, we're also losing 10 billion gallons of water per rain event. And then per year, it's about 100 billion gallons. And these 250 million is per day. And so basically all this water is coming from very far away sources and then going through LA and then out into the ocean. So not a very good system. And another thing to bring up is that most of over half of this water that we send from so far away is being used, cleaned, very, very clean to drinkable quality, and then used to water our lawns and do our landscaping. So what are the solutions? And this is the most fun part of the talk. We can capture, conserve, and reuse water. So y'all have probably seen these chasing arrows with regards to plastics and paper recyclables, right? But we also have we also have them with water as well: capture, conserve, and reuse. And this gives us a circular water cycle, which is exactly what we are looking for. And so I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about the things that LA is doing, like really big projects that you may or may not have heard of before, to capture and reuse water. But then you could also ask me questions about ways that you as an individual can make changes in your life to conserve water. One of the big ones is to replace lawns with more climate appropriate landscaping is one way, but there are also many changes that can be made, big and small. So the first really big project that's happening to reuse water in LA is very exciting. If you haven't heard of it before, it's called the Hyperion 2035 project. And so the idea is there are 4 water treatment plants in LA. And in fact, 3 of them are already at 100% reuse. But Hyperion water treatment plant is at 27% reuse, and it's aiming to get to 100% by 2035. So Hyperion 2035 project. And this is actually going to have a much bigger impact than it sounds, because Hyperion treats more water than the other plants do. So currently, even though 3 of our water treatment plants are at 100% reuse, only 40% of the total water in LA today is actually recycled. So there's 70% more to get cleaned. And that's to prevent it from being dumped out into the ocean, and instead can go sort of in a roundabout way, right back to us. So here are some ideas that differentiate different types of water reuse. So there's two main categories for water reuse, potable and non-potable water. The current state of water recycling in LA for non-potable reuse cases are all in the outdoors. So they're not, this non-potable water is not going to go into your house. Some examples that happen today are this non-potable recycled water. It cleans just enough to be safe to put in the environment, goes in to, for example, provides the water for our LA River. It is clean enough to recreate in, perfectly wonderful to go kayaking there. And it recharges our groundwater. And if you recharge groundwater right near the ocean, it can prevent saltwater intrusion into that groundwater, keeping our freshwater groundwater safe. And then also for irrigation as well. So landscaping with purple pipes means we're using reused water rather than freshly imported cleaned water. Okay, so the big idea for Hyperion 2035 is to add a whole bunch of cleaning cycles to go from non-potable recycling to potable. So it's going to be super clean, really amazing. I'm highlighting everything that's new in orange, just like all these stages of cleanliness, basically. So if you have questions about how safe this water is it getting, for example, when I wash my clothes and my clothes have microplastics in them, is it getting that? If you have any safety questions, you can ask me about that. If I don't know the answer, I know exactly who to forward those questions to. So yes, I'm on the personally on the community advisory group for this project. So I may be able to answer some questions. And again, if not, I can get those answers for you if you want to know more about our water recycling. And so like the last big project that I'm going to talk to you about is called the Safe Clean Water Program. So this program began when Measure W was overwhelmingly passed by voters in 2018. People of LA decided to tax themselves to create safe, clean outdoor water. So I just added some slides here. So, so background, we want to capture stormwater in order to increase our water supply to make us more drought resilient, right? Which is what we're talking about in this talk. But the problem is that a lot of the water, our local water bodies are impaired. They have contaminants in them. And whenever our stormwater falls down to the ground, it is in our urban environment almost immediately picks up pollution from our streets. And so that is one difficulty of collecting stormwater. And another thing that this program considers is that there is not an equal pollution burden across all of our communities. So that polluted water, as well as other pollutants, are causing uneven consequences for people in LA. So something to point out is that this program is actually meant to solve multiple problems at once. It's increasing our local water supply, right? But it's also cleaning that water and improving the water quality and getting that pollution out of our communities. And also it's working to make these changes with equity in mind. So there is money set aside specifically to go to under-resourced communities and make sure that everyone is getting clean water. We're making this water for everyone. And I think that's pretty special and new. So just because y'all might not be able to picture what exactly this is, I'm going to give a few examples of some of the things the Safe Clean Water Program is doing. So imagine like in the long term, what we would really like to do is build brand new parks that collect stormwater. But so far, we are in the beginnings of the program. It's in its fourth year now. And so far we are doing projects where depending on where you are in the county, you can build bioswales, so green areas on sidewalks and in streets to allow rainwater to infiltrate naturally, right, in parking lots. But in other areas, there is a layer of, among other complications, there's a layer of clay in between the aqueducts underground, the underwater storage, and then the surface. And so even if you do allow more infiltration, that water isn't going to go into our stormwater, our groundwater storage. And so what people are doing is building what are, I don't know why I'm blinking, cisterns, are building these large underwater cisterns to collect water underneath parks. And then that water could be used to landscape the parks above them, or it can be releasing that water at night to the water treatment plants to be cleaned and recycled. And so very amazing and diverse projects that are happening with the Safe Clean Water Program. Additionally, there's building of parks and wetlands because of wetlands and trees and other nature can actually help to clean contaminants out of the water as well in a natural way, while grabbing carbon and making oxygen. One of the last things I want to say is that Heal the Bay got into the Safe Clean Water Program as members in 2021, and we oversee projects that are happening down in the South Santa Monica Bay and the Central Santa Monica Bay. So if you have questions or ideas for projects, we would love to talk about them with you. And the last bit of news is I recently did some math based on the projects that have been funded and have already been funded since this year. And the Safe Clean Water Program will have the capacity to collect 50% of LA's stormwater in the next 5 years. So we're basically already about to be halfway there. But the thing is that the projects that have already been funded are really big projects, and the projects that have left to be funded, it's not like we're like 10 years from completion. We're actually expected to be done collecting stormwater in the year 2050. And the last bit's going to be a lot slower because we're trying to collect stormwater from all these different places. What the term I've heard is urban acupuncture. So just like lots of small projects to really like get that rainwater from different areas. But good news is that we've already started with a bang and are making a lot of progress. So I would love to take some questions. I can go back to any slides or just, talk about anything water y'all would like.
Question. Hi, can I ask a question?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What I wonder about is, I think there is a water treatment plant in northern Orange County that could provide potable water.
Yes.
There is public resistance to the idea of taking this water and cleaning it. It's actually cleaner, I understand, but you get bottled water, but people don't want it. How do you overcome that problem? And is there such a plant in Orange County?
I think that is a really good question. I will point out some holes in my knowledge, and that is I don't know as much about Orange County, having been in this field for only about 2.5 years. But it is my understanding that Orange County actually has been recycling water for much longer than Los Angeles already. And that they have found ways to overcome that barrier. I think today, some ways that we're working to overcome the fear of toilet to tap, which isn't exactly what's happening here, is we're adding a lot of amazing new technologies. So we're trading out our digestion vats with something called a membrane bioreactor, and that membrane, like, basically it gets the water way cleaner than it would have otherwise, and really, yep, we've added several different steps to get the waterway cleaner, but even then, because we don't want to concern people about having that water go straight into their sinks, we're putting that water back into the ground. So we get it really, really, really clean enough to drink, and then we're putting it into the ground, and that also cleans it, right? Because there's the nature, it adds back in a lot of the minerals from the ground, and then from our groundwater we suck it back up, and then we clean it again with the normal way that we clean groundwater before sending it into people's homes. So that water is just going to be super duper clean.
So running it through the groundwater system makes it more politically palatable.
It also makes it healthier.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. If I could just jump in a second, Forrest. Orange County's groundwater replenishment system opened in 2008. It was one of the largest and state-of-the-art in the world at the time. It has since been expanded. It does use both microfiltration, UV, and reverse osmosis to purify the water. They have offered tours to the public, and I'd highly encourage anyone to sign up to go. The water is so bland tasting when it comes out of the system that they actually end up adding some minerals and things back into it to make it more palatable to our palates. But yes, it is has been in operation since 2008. It's been expanded to double its size since then, and is definitely state of the art.
Wow, 2008 is a lot more recent than I thought. But yes, we're adding similar reverse osmosis, UV, very neat. So in Orange County, y'all add the minerals in yourselves. Does that mean it goes right to the taps? Which I think is perfectly safe.
It gets put back into the groundwater system.
Okay.
So it's also acting as a barrier for salt water to keep it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then replenishes we have a huge groundwater basin in northern Orange County.
Oh, very interesting. Yes, we are grateful that y'all led the way in dispelling that concern a little bit. Did that answer the question fully? Were there any parts missing?
I thought it was a fantastic presentation, and your slides are cute, but very informative also. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Can I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Forrest? Hi, I'm Laura. I was going to ask, does this give us a better chance of fending off all this desalination energy that's I still hear about?
Yes, I really think so. With you mean is capturing stormwater and recycling our local water combined going to be sufficient to eliminate the need for either imported water or water desalination?
Right.
And I'm still, because I am an outreach person, I'm still trying to fully finish the math with just whenever we recycle our local water, some of the water is lost because it gets too salty. Something has to carry out a lot of that impurities. So we're not always getting back as much water as we started with. And I've been trying to figure out if the stormwater that we're capturing is going to be sufficient to fill that gap, or if we will still continue to need some small amount of imported water. And I hope to have that answer, in the coming months.
Yeah, because that's a big challenge, and there's still a lot of people talking about putting in desalination, and that's also very energy intensive.
I agree. Desalination is the most like energy intensive, yeah, climate change altering process that you can do. Um,
So that's but the goal is to reduce both the importing and the potentially putting in desalination plants.
yes, I think that there is widespread agreement among the circles that I talk with about the downsides of desalination, and that many people believe that it is a last resort for many reasons. Additionally, it would cost more to people, making water less accessible. Like, but at the same time, it is, yeah, still a possibility available to us, but definitely not one that we want to access until we've fully used up the resources that we have here locally.
Right.
One example that my boss gave me recently was Israel. A lot of people say, well, Israel does desalination, but she said that before they even tried to do desalination, they fully got a really good recycled water system and like just tried to use these much more economical and environmentally friendly methods first.
Yeah. Well, I was very encouraged by your talk. I found it very informative. I was a little behind on what's been happening, so it's I'm very hopeful about what is happening. I don't understand the math either as far as Orange County is all really, it's awesome that we're doing good stuff, but we are so much less of an impact than that greater Los Angeles area as far as number of humans and amount of square footage or whatever. All those long
pollution going into the ocean.
Yes. So it's
I
great.
have another question.
Yeah.
Are you making can you make an economic argument, a cost argument that the water that you suggest of recycling is much less expensive than a desalination plant? Because that's about the most expensive water that you can think of for the consumer.
I've seen figures from scientific papers showing that desalination is significantly more expensive, even from the like there's non-potable recycling and potable, and potable recycling is more energy intensive than non-potable, but like desalination still costs even more. And it really has to do with, I think, the salts. Whenever we were talking in our last advisory committee meeting about Hyperion, they were saying that we would love to recycle all the water, but at some point you're taking out so much water that the water gets so salty that it takes a lot more energy to continue pulling water out of that. So it may be that we only recycle about 80% of the water, and that's just because we could scientifically pull out more water from there, but the environmental and economic costs of doing so might not make it worth it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for Forrest? Thank you, Forrest, for your talk. We've learned so much, and it's encouraging to know what is going on in Los Angeles. I hope that Orange County will continue with their recycling efforts. Also, thank you again.
Thank you. Yes, I feel encouraged too. I've really felt very good from what I've learned at this job, and I'm glad I can pass that on. Have a good night.
Thank you.
This was our hybrid experiment, and I think it worked very well. Thank you again for setting this up, Leslie and Todd. And sorry, oh, the light.
Down, up.
Up, up.
Whoops.
There we go. All
There we go.
right.
Ah, light.
And
see
I hope we can repeat this experience at the next meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and good night.
Ed, before you go,
Yes.
I'd like to remind everyone that if you have not voted yet for the Sierra Club Board of Directors, to please cast your ballots. Now, your vote is very important.
Thank you, Sharon.